of record. Yeah, technical problems here. So welcome to the third night of the all forum candidates for in regard for the regional district. In this case is Prince George, North Cariboo. So my name is Gil Quinnell, and I'll be moderating this forum this evening. This is a forum meant to convey ideas for the questions we have. This is not a debate amongst the candidates this time. So I'm not here to cut people over and prove one person better than another. So all candidates forum is being held in the traditional territory of the Late Nate. We give our thanks and gratitude to the candidates for showing up tonight. Thank you. And providing the citizens of your ridings the opportunity to know your individuals and values. This forum is provided as an invitation. Is provided, and the topic will be in relation to the energy transition. So there are lots of topics in this election we're aware of, but so to keep things narrow focus, we're just looking at energy transition tonight. So I'll be asking questions to the candidates in the forum. I'm going to ask the same question to both candidates. We'll first one leading will be the second one answering the previous question. The incumbent gets the advantage by going first today, so get the incumbent challenge gets the incumbent advantage. So you'll have 3 minutes to answer the question, to respond to the question, and then the other person will have their 3 minutes. We have, was it 2 minutes? I'm going to change my notes. So 2 minutes to answer the question, and then we will, so you'll see a red card, yellow card for a warning, 30-second warning, and a red card. I will allow some leeway there depending on where you are in your sentence, but so, and then after you both answer the question, if one of you wants to add to your answer, someone else said something that tweaked something, you'll have 3 blue cards in front of you that you can then raise to use, so you can then raise the point or additional point you have, and you'll have 2 minutes due on that one as well. So, like I said, this is a non-partisan event intended to provide the opportunity to hear from each candidate. None of us are here to cheer, jeer, produce excessive applause. So, organizers of the all-candidate forum are in no way expressing or endorsing the candidates attending. Again, this is a reminder, everybody, we're on all candidates forum regarding the energy transition. So, with that said, we can get started with question number 1. Orly, I use your first names if you're okay with that. So introducing the candidates, Sarafos. So we have what we have here is we have Coralie Oakes, our independent, is also the incumbent currently for the transfer over with this new modified riding, our electoral district, I understand, now including pieces of Prince George, correct? Yeah. And then representing the Green Party, we have Randy Thompson. So actually, give an opportunity now if you want to have a few minutes to introduce yourself and have any opening statements.
Thank you, Gil. First, if I can begin this evening in a good place and recognize with respect that we are gathered this evening on the Clele Tene. And I'd also like to honor our elders and our knowledge keepers. I'm excited to be here this evening. And the first thing I want to do is acknowledge the organizers. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to coordinate events like this. And our democracy works when people have the ability to come together, to listen, to share ideas. And I think it's important that this is done. So thank you very much to the organizers. I also want to thank Randy, and he won't say this, but I can. We had a debate last night, and then, not to embarrass you, but then Randy went to worked all night, and then has come here tonight. And I want to acknowledge that because that is about commitment. That is about taking the effort to come and to join and to share ideas. And I just want to thank you for that. We do better work when we have the ability to share ideas and through election campaigns to come together and to learn from each other and to gather the best. And that is what I know. We've had the opportunity to share some really important ideas. I'm Coralie Oakes. I'm running as an independent in this next election. I've had the privilege of serving as the MLA since 2013. So over a decade, I've had the privilege of working closely with so much and so many people in the riding. The riding actually, prior to the Electoral Commission's changes, actually represented 41 communities. Cariboo North was a riding that was larger than Vancouver Island. And as you can well imagine, it goes down to Williams Lake and Horsefly and Likely, but it also goes out to Cluskis and connects with Artemis Gold. And then you go out the other way and you've got Buckridge. It's a very large riding. And now it is an opportunity to come and meet the people of Prince George. And that is an opportunity to learn. It is an urban area. And so that's a little different for me. And I look forward to learning from people as we go through this campaign. I'm still not getting lights, so I'm just going to keep going because I can. So a lot of people have asked me, Coralie, what does being an independent provide to the voters this election? Well, my comments to you this evening is I believe that this next election is going to be very close. And in that case, similar to the Green Party in 2017, when there is a close election, an independent or a Green has the opportunity to really be the balance of power. And in a minority government, an independent or a Green has the ability to really determine what legislation moves forward, what policies move forward. And I think that places your voice in a very unique opportunity this election. So I look forward to this evening. I look forward to learning more and sharing a little bit about myself.
Well, thank you, Coralie. Lately, Tene land that I'm on is it's an important part of British Columbian history and Canadian history. The First Nations of Canada were handed a pretty raw deal. So I'm really glad that actually most of BC is unseated. It shows that they still can get some respect for the land that they own. I was heavily involved in Native spirituality when I was down the coast. I've been in many sweat lodges and healing circles, so I do understand Native culture probably better than most people from having sat on a dirt floor and had a sweat lodge experience many times. It's a beautiful thing. It is different than last night because we had, here's your question. You have a minute, go. And it's like, save the world in 60 seconds or less, and it was tough because it's like, and they ended up giving us a minute and a half. So that was, so this is like glorious. We have a chance to actually say something. I thank you for acknowledging the work. I work for the city of Quesnel. I work full time. I do 4 on, 4 off. So I do 2-day shifts, 2 night shifts, 12-hour shifts. I used to work for Arrow. I had the same sort of schedule, week of days, week of nights, 12-hour shifts. Your body gets used to being completely screwed up. I have no circadian rhythm anymore. I sleep when I can or I have to. That's pretty much it. All in the name of paying the bills. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Like I say, I do work for the city of Quesnel. And I have my own business. I grow garlic. I've been growing garlic for 30 years. My company is Oddball Garlic Company. You may have seen me at some of the markets, Studio Fair, Winterfest, BCNE in Quesnel Garlic Festival and South Cariboo Garlic Festival. So I've been making my products for 25 years, and it's something that it's not a commercial. I'm a small businessman. I understand business. I understand about taking a product, garlic, pull it out of the ground and go, people like this, but it's got a shelf life. So why don't I give it value by turning it into something else? That's called value adding. It's pretty obvious. So my cooking background, I went from high school to cooking school. So I used to work in radio. I worked in the film and television industry as an actor and doing background. There's some information. It's a bit of a bio. If you want to grab one of my little handouts, you can read a little bit about me. But I've done a lot of different things. And I asked a native elder, Pat Hendrickson, to give me a name. I offered him tobacco, and in the next sweat I saw him, he said, I had a hard time coming up with a name for you, but I decided on Man Who Looks Down Many Roads. And he was right. I was expecting something else, but Buffalo Guy or something like that, Big Smoke. But he's right in that I've done a lot of different things. I've seen a lot of different things in this world. I always try to do the best at what I do, whatever job or activity I'm doing, I try to do the best I can. And I try to solve things. I think that looking down many roads things is I see things and I go, well, that's wrong. Why don't we got to fix that. There's got to be a better way. I've always been, there's got to be a better way kind of person. And our world is in a great state of there's got to be a better way. And that's something I put on my information is there is a better way. And to me, that's the BC Green Party. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You can hang on to the mic because, no. Oh, I was going to have you ask that because we're switching back and forth. So that way, minimize the mic transfer back and forth, right? So an engineer had to be efficient. So retired engineers, sorry, be careful of that. So I've broken out my questions. So first group, we're going to be more societal policy based to them. Then I'll move into one. I think I only have one question regarding transport. And then we'll have a few, and we'll close off the night with some few questions and more kind of an environmental twinge to it. So going with that. So first question number one. So people are concerned about the cost of living. Some are asking for carbon tax to be dropped from the price of gas, while others are asking to make it easier to switch to electric vehicles. If elected, what will you do with respect to the carbon tax on gasoline? And would you make it easier to switch to electric vehicles?
The Green Party's position on carbon tax, it's fairly simple. They believe that it needs to be kept in place. It's meant to be a way for industry to pay for the emissions that they're putting out. A lot of people have made a lot of conspiracy theory type things about carbon. Oh, there's been carbons for billions of years. Plants breathe in carbon and breathe out oxygen. And I get a lot of that stuff on the writings that I do. And I wrote a piece about that carbon, oil, and gas are literally sunlight from millions of years ago, stored in the earth. And when you release it quickly into the environment, it releases a whole bunch of stored carbon dioxide that we're already getting sun. So it increases the temperature of the planet and increases the amount of carbon that's in it. And sure, there's carbon here. There's always been carbon and oxygen. It's part of our cycle, but we completely throw off the balance of carbon in releasing a bunch of it that was stored by the earth, because it seems the earth knowed what to do with it, put it away, and don't let it sit on the planet itself. So the Green Party believes that if you're releasing carbon in an industrial form, you should pay. And they want to remove the annual emissions limit for industry. That would mean that the more they pollute, the more they pay. And it's something that's important, that if we don't have a consequence for being a polluter, then they just go, well, we'll just keep polluting. So it's meant to be something that we can saddle industry with and make it easier for us with rebates through the carbon tax for citizens. Thank you.
Same question?
Perfect. I didn't know if we had to use the cards.
No. Is it you get to answer the question. And then if you hear something you want to add to it later, you can then flash your
Oh,
cards.
look at that. Wow, that's
So
fantastic.
we give rebuttal opportunities here.
Oh, this is fantastic. Like I said, last night it was okay, solve housing in a minute and a half. And it really was a little bit of a challenge. So this is a great opportunity to have
We wanted to hear ideas
and to get
not
ideas.
not challenge you to think quickly and
Exactly.
talk quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think the first thing I wanted to share with you as an independent, why it's different than what would I do as a party. I'm not a party. As an independent, you are my leader. And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how I prepared for this evening in hopes that that will help you understand a little bit about my approach to being an MLA. So the first thing I did, of course, is to go to the experts. And I had the opportunity to sit down, first of all, get lots of information. Doug and Anne, thank you for doing such an amazing job with the PG Electric Vehicle Association. The newsletters, the information that is in that, in those newsletters and in the presentations, at first glance, Doug will know that I was a little overwhelmed. And I thought, what am I getting myself into? Thank you to the fact checkers in the back, because I thought, wow, this is a lot. From that conversation, I had the opportunity, I was out door knocking and I met a wonderful couple that are with Sekani Biofuels, and they provided me some very interesting information for preparing for this evening. The third piece is I thought, we're at the university. What better way to learn and to get ideas to bring forward this evening was to reach out to the academics, to reach out to the experts that are currently working on these very projects. And so tonight, a lot of the ideas that I will be bringing forward are what I heard from people that are working in this field, in this community. I see a card. I haven't quite answered the question yet, but I hope what you will get from my comments this evening is that I don't have all the answers. But I think what you want in a representative is somebody that will go out into community and go and talk to the experts.
Oh, hang on to the mic now. We're just yeah, because like I said, be efficient. So now she'll start on the next question. Then you, well, it's all fair. So question number 2. This is what I call the paradox question. So both the federal and provincial energy policies enable the expansion of fossil fuel extraction and use, while also making a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If elected, how would you deal with this contradiction?
Thank you. I'm going to actually offer another contradiction, and I think this is a strong place for us to solve problems. I come from local government, and I think that I didn't recognize that in the beginning. And I went through and I looked at a lot of the work that is being done, exceptional work that is being done by the local government. And I think community is where we start on strong policy. We need to be looking at, and I used a case study for this evening's purposes, and that is Wells. Of course, the District of Wells is an important community in this riding, and looked at their community energy and emissions inventory and really focused on demand side management and the work that they have done over many years. And we looked at how you could utilize district energy, renewable energy systems, building high growth measures, sustainability checklists for the buildings. Wells is a really interesting case study because it's small enough that it provides us a really interesting opportunity to look at how we can really measure solutions in a small area. And I know the question was around federal and provincial policies. But I often feel that from my experience, the work done in local governments and regional districts are the ones closest to the community. And I think that as opposed to having a top-down approach on policy, we really need to be grassroots and we need to be listening more and working closer with local governments and regional districts.
So the question being about the political doublespeak of we need to expand fossil fuel production and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those are two different things. One feeds the other one. The Green Party's position is to be reducing greenhouse gas production and emissions, ending subsidization for oil and gas so that they're paying their own bills, because a lot of the weight of the oil and gas industry is carried by the taxpayer, and as most people are unaware of it. The Green Party like to accelerate the energy efficiency and renewable technologies that are out there so that we can rely less on the fossil fuels that have just been, let's just face it, it's been from the beginning of cars beginning, automobiles. But there was electric vehicles in the early 1900s. But the thing that happened was oil and gas saw those are competing with us, so we sabotaged them. And that's happened over and over again, that the oil and gas industry has bought things and just squashed them and quietly put them away because it interferes with their profit margin. And we need to focus on eliminating oil and gas. Has it been our bread and butter or theirs in our energy? Yes, but it's not the only way of doing it. There's better ways, there's clean energy, there's newer technologies. We can do things that actually make a difference, and we end up with a cleaner environment, less pollution, cleaner air, and a way that we can get out of this mess that we're in, that, let's face it, the oil and gas industry has just had us by something forever. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question is, part of the energy transition is going to be is requiring new materials and sourcing of materials, right? So, if electricity goes up, you got more copper and there's other more exotic materials. Some of which, or a lot of it, is in BC. So, in keeping with that, if elected, how will your party balance respecting Indigenous rights and titles over lands and resources with the increasing pressure to source materials to enable this energy transition?
So because the Green Party greatly respects the dignity of First Nations and for what they've been through, they would have equity ownership and streamline the regulatory processes. And they mandate a minimum of 50% equity ownership for First Nations in large renewable energy projects. So instead of just saying, yeah, it's the unceded territory, but we're cutting your forest down, there is going to be respect and involvement and actual, I guess, contribution by First Nations. They've been pushed around for so long. Green Party would invest in expanded energy storage capacity and improving the distribution system. So First Nations could have their own energy system on, for lack of a better term, a reserve. Because most communities in British Columbia, because we're talking about the vastness of this riding, is they're very far apart. They're hard to have services that connect everybody together. So energy systems can be created to be regionally and community benefiting. So you don't have to have transmission lines going to every community. You can have them as independent energy sources, and that can be done for First Nations. So if things are mined or gathered on First Nations, they would receive much more benefit than they have been traditionally. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Was the critical mineral strategy also a part of the question, or did I hear that incorrect?
No, it's critical minerals or energy projects we are looking at, but here's species lot. Is focused more on the mineral side to,
Okay.
so.
Perfect. So again, before coming up here this evening, yesterday I had the opportunity to sit down with the Lataco First Nation, Lataco Dene First Nations, to understand again, before we went into the debate yesterday, and of course this evening, to get an understanding from them and listen to them about what their thoughts were as we are having this debate. One of the things that was brought up that I think is critically important and maybe a little off the direct question is we had a long conversation about building capacity of the workforce, particularly the First Nations workforce, and the opportunity to have access to the jobs that are in these communities. We have a lot of uh, projects that are moving forward in the riding around mining. And it's critically important, first, economic reconciliation with our First Nations. And that work is moving forward. But the second piece is that our First Nations have to have access to those jobs. And so we have to look at how we train and how we can support those communities, both from a workforce development piece and from a small business perspective. And so I greatly appreciate the Lataco Dene Nation for sitting down with me and providing their insight that I can share with you this evening.
All right, thank you. So we'll move more of a transport question this time. So the current BC government is committed to having 10,000 public charging stations in operation and effectively doubling the number of public charging stations by 2030. So are you in support of this commitment? Higher, lower, none at all?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is in the newsletters and the opportunity to sit down and learn and listen, I'm going back to the affordability comment. And what really stood out for me when I had the chance to connect with Doug, and thank you, Anne, was really the message around the affordability piece in electric vehicles. And I think that's a message that I think we all need to do a better job of getting that out there. And so that's my commitment to you, to get educated and to be spreading that information. So that's the first piece. With that, if we're moving forward, we have to build out the system and we have to make sure that those opportunities are available. So that's the one piece. On heavy duty transportation, if I may, just for a moment, one of the things when I was reviewing a lot of the material on the transportation aspect is I had the opportunity to talk with the MBA program. And one of the things I don't believe we utilize enough is the expertise at the university. And the fact that if transportation is one of the highest costs or highest drivers of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's probably one of the best places for us to look at for reducing emissions, that supply chain logistics could be developed and modeling in partnership with some of the work that's currently being done at the university. And so again, where it is, I think government needs to do a far better job of working closer with academia, working closer with post-secondary institutions, and working with experts to help drive the policy that's connected to the local community. And I think as an independent, not tied to a party, I have the ability to really utilize the voice of the local community.
Probably should have you sitting a little closer together. We're going to come back with a little back injury by the time the night's over.
I can stretch, So the 10,000 figure, would the Green Party maintain that? Probably not. We'd probably go beyond that. Getting the infrastructure is the number one detriment or negative aspect of having an EV vehicle if you can't charge it. You can charge it at home, that's fine, but if you're out somewhere and there's nowhere to charge it, you're kind of hooped. So increasing the number of charging stations would be a fundamental action of the Green Party. Because if you don't have those stations out there, people aren't going to buy EV vehicles. For me personally, I'm excited about the EV idea because as a child, I knew that electric vehicles were happening at the turn of the century. And now we can get rid of those polluting cars and it'll be great. And I'll be able to drive around in an electric car. And it's all been kind of squashed and pushed down by the whole thing. I would push, and I've had the idea of a bare bones A to B electric vehicle to get you to where you need to go, especially if you're commuting within the city. You don't need a stereo and a really fancy vehicle. You need to get from here to there. And there should be choices of vehicles because you had mentioned the cost. I think some of the costs are very high. But if we prioritize a program where you want your bare bones EV vehicle to get you where you need to go, and that's it. I don't need anything fancy. Doesn't have to have a Keurig in it making me a coffee. I just need to get to work, and that's it. So I would love to see that prioritized, a low cost electric vehicle for the public. Thank you.
All right. Oh, we have a response.
Just helps. I like this because then I can provide greater clarity in the question that I responded to. What I learned through reading the material is the how electric vehicles can save people money. And I know that there's the expense of the upfront piece, and of course we have to address that and look at that. But I did not realize until we had a lot of really important graphs how much an individual can save by driving an electric vehicle. And so I thought that that was good information, and I will certainly be sharing and that out with more people. And if you haven't read the newsletters, make sure you do.
All right. Thank you.
I think I screwed up.
Oh, did you turn it off? Oh, no.
Don't you worry. I got 3 cards here waiting for you.
Yeah,
So.
you still got time. She used one. You got 3. You still got 3 timeouts left. You're good. Next one. So where did I put it? So currently, more now on a power question. So currently, 98% of the power generated for BC is integrated. An integrated grid is from clean and renewable sources, making BC a leader in North America when it comes to clean energy. If elected, what is the leadership you would impose or convey to maintain this leadership?
A lot of that, pretty much all of that energy is hydroelectric energy that's produced by old projects. And Site C is supposed to be coming on. Site C was originally pushed forward so that there was power for LNG. That's what it's for. You have to turn LNG to such a low temperature that it liquefies and then you store it. So a huge amount of electricity is needed for LNG. If we move away from LNG and have oil and gas not subsidized by the citizens of British Columbia, it would free up all the energy from Site C to go to the citizens of British Columbia. We also sell a lot of our energy to the United States, and we sell it at a really cheap rate compared to what we pay for it in our home. So when they buy it in bulk, they get it for very cheap. So if we prioritize the citizens of British Columbia and the energy and the industry of British Columbia, not the oil and gas industry, everybody needs electricity. If you're going to electrify a province, you're going to need a lot of electricity. And we're literally giving it away to people who are polluting our environment. So if we change our priorities, take the subsidies away, make them pay for their own gas the electricity generation, then we benefit as citizens. Because the benefit, if for far too long, has gone to industry, corporate greed, and doublespeak. And it's time that we took priority because it's just time.
Wait, thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the things that is critically important for us to continue our focus on is how we're looking at the demand side management. So again, how do we reduce our emissions? What are the incentives that governments can utilize to help support our communities in reducing emissions? And I think we recognize the electricity grid. We do not have enough energy on the grid to meet the transition that we're looking at. So we must continue to do a much better job of education, of looking at how you can take responsibility in your homes and in your workplace to reduce those emissions. And I think setting targets and measurements are really important. In 2007, when we looked at working with local governments around the climate readiness action plans, and we integrated that information into the official community plans and the regional growth strategies, that was critical because that provided us a baseline of what we needed to do in communities, and we could look back on that. My concern now is we've moved away from a lot of the official community plans and regional growth strategies because the provincial government has made some significant changes on how we address OCPs. And I'm concerned about that. And so my commitment is to be going to Victoria and recognizing the fact that we cannot lose that work and that data that we have built up in community over a decade because of a policy by a government that just stopped listening.
All right. So next,
You do that with such a nice smile too. So thank you.
so with that said, so part of the new energy, as you mentioned, is a significant amount of new and that generating capacity is going to be required as we transition more to more electrical sources or uses of electricity. That's a large, it's nearly double what we're currently generating capacity now. So with that said, so do you believe in maintaining the current ban on nuclear production as an option for just increasing the capacity?
That's a tough question because the first thing I will say is I do not know enough about nuclear energy to answer this question, and I'd rather try and share that with you as opposed to try and bluff my way through it. But here's what I do know. I do know that we do have to understand new technology or understand the impact of choices that we make onto the energy grid. And from the conversations I have had on nuclear, what I've learned is that there are significant challenges with setting up nuclear power, and the cost and the timeline makes it something that could not be attained in a reasonable timeline. So that's what I have heard when I talked to people locally about that particular thing. The other thing, I don't want to leave here this evening without making a pitch going back again to the District of Wells. We forget that we still have communities in our riding that do not have access to electrification on the grid, right? So we need to be electrifying Highway 26. Before we start looking at all of these other projects out there in the region, we should be taking care of our own communities to make sure that they can build the homes, that they can actually, like Wells has a huge opportunity to build out much needed housing because they have they have access to Crown land in the district, which could be built out, but they can't build any more homes out into Wells because there's nothing available on the electrical grid. If we were to manage through that, we help solve a housing problem. When we looked at the math a couple of years ago with economic development, it could be about 2,000 jobs, because with the electrification of Highway 26, you've got Troll Ski Resort, you have a lot of other economic opportunities in the region that we could look at. So going back to nuclear power, I got the red light.
I'll take it in a different direction. Nuclear energy is like having an intimate relationship with someone. It's really good until it's not. And when it goes bad, it's really bad. Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, those are angry girlfriends, you know. It's something that you can rely on until something happens that you didn't expect or thought you had taken care of. The Green Party's position is that they do not want to see nuclear energy, and I support that. The nuclear waste disposal system has never been figured out. They've never found a way to make it safe. They've got it in boxes in salt mines somewhere because they don't know what to do with it. It's got a half-life of 10,000 years, and at that time, it'll still kill you. So why are we doing that? It's a way to make energy. Yeah. But it's not the only way, and it's not the best way, and it's one of the most dangerous ways of doing it. So the Green Party's position is no, as far as I can tell. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So the next question is, so compared to the rest of the globe, BC has a unique advantage with 98% of its electricity already being generated from clean renewable sources. Even so, 19% of BC energy is provided by electricity, with another 11% by biomass and 70% by fossil fuels. If elected, what will you do to decrease this reliance on carbon and biomass fuels?
So this kind of ties together a few things that I said before, as BC is a big place and has got a lot of space in it, and people are not all huddled together in the same place. So transmission of power, electricity, is not easy for all communities. There is need for coal, diesel generation. A lot of First Nations have diesel generation of their power because it can be set up in one place. You know, so there's different ways to generate electricity. But if we got away from, like I said before, about selling our electricity and utilizing it more, we can have lots of power that we don't have to just sell to somebody else. We can keep it ourselves. But the idea of having regionally set up small scale distributed like solar projects and better capacity, we can have clean energy in those far communities, and instead of having to have fossil fuel, because clean energy, like the storing and the geothermal and wind, sure, it's not 100%. It's in transition. That's why we're here. We're in an energy transition. We're trying to figure this stuff out. And the things that do work, but can be made better. So instead of, saying, this is all just a bunch of hooey, like, are there things that aren't perfect? Yes, of course. There's a whole lot of things that aren't perfect about fossil fuel generation for electricity. So you can look at safe and then clean energy solutions as being pie in the sky, but it takes time to perfect things. And the oil and gas industry has had a lot of time, and they're still pretty dirty. Thanks. A 2 for me.
You want to go back to the 1 minute?
You want to use your blue card? Oh,
And
that's transitioning of energy. Ooh. Oh,
time's not up yet, and we're good.
yeah. This is it's a tough question, only because I'm going to relate it to the fact that our communities are very different. And I was out in NASCO last week, and they're currently working on a project around food security. And one of the things they put in some greenhouses, and they've got a number of projects that they're looking at that I think are really exciting projects. I think it's the community that needs to be looking at what the best renewable energy is for that particular community and tied into the project that they're working on. I know we've also looked at geothermal out in that particular part of the area. NASCO has done, there's some really interesting research out in NASCO and the NASCO cone. It was an old volcano. And it's fascinating where I think that there's some opportunities out there that around energy transition that maybe we haven't looked at. So sometimes I get nervous when we as a province or we as elected officials try and create a solution or a one size fits all solution when each of our communities are distinct and different. And the Indigenous communities, the importance of respecting their self-determination is also critical in that. So I thought the NASCO piece was an interesting case study in a response to this question. And where possible, I will always answer a question where I think the community, maybe we can learn something about an interesting part of our region.
Thank you. Fair enough.
After reading the question, a word that escaped me was in the last sentence, reliance on carbon emitting biomass and fossil fuels. Is that correct? That was that question.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, like I said, I used to work for Arrow. I moved chips, shavings, sawdust, hog fuel around to the pellet plant. It was Pinnacle Pellet, then it's Drax now, and I've said it before, Drax is an evil entity. They moved to the fossil fuel industry, or to, the pellet industry a few years ago. Drax moved into BC or from the UK, and they doubled BC's output of pellets in the first year. Now, they say, oh, it's sawmill waste. You don't double the sawmill output of waste in 1 year when things are getting less, when there's reduced timber supply. They were cutting primary forests for pellet production. My take on biomass energy is burning wood for heat. That's just a step above Neanderthal. You know, it's a wood fire for heat. And it's terrible when you're cutting down primary forests and grinding them up for wood fires. Those pellets from Pinnacle, which is now Drax, because I know I worked there. I didn't work for them, but I worked there. And there's a train track behind it. It gets put on the trains. It goes to the cargo ships at the coast. It gets boated halfway around the planet. It's put on another train, and those pellets are burned in a energy producing plant that emits more carbon when that plant burned coal. So I am completely against biomass energy if you're talking about pellets.
All right. Thank you. So
Back to you.
yeah. Go ahead, because it was it's that keeps you on your toes that way. So the next question: the climate is warming, and extreme weather patterns are causing more frequent floods, droughts, landslides, and wildfires. What extent do you believe transitioning from a carbon-based energy to electricity and other forms of green energy will help slow down warming and extreme weather events?
Can I use like my cards for myself? So we'd have more time to talk about a particular, oh, I could maybe go back and forth.
Once
There,
he's done, you can use your card
there
to
you
come
go.
back.
Because I think this is such an important comment or a question, because I think we need to be focusing on the fact that we need to be more prepared, obviously, and what that looks like in a community engagement. Clearly, we know that it's going to result in more extreme weather, and we've certainly seen that. Look, I Um, Probably the most challenging day I've had as an elected official, as an MLA, was in August of 2017 when we were evacuating all of Williams Lake. And basically, we had forest fires through the entire region. And I remember sitting down with the BC wildfire commander, and he said, Corley, you've got to be prepared that I think we might lose it all. And it wasn't just one community. It was this idea that we could potentially have lost the entire Cariboo. And if you look at the fire maps going back to 2017, it was significant. And I hadn't really thought about those extreme impacts prior to then. Fast forward 2 more years, and one of the things I can share is that the folks who had gone through Fort Mac came and sat down and met with us and said, this is what you now need to be prepared for. And they said that your next step is you're going to have to deal with the landslides and the impacts on the infrastructure and the roads. And so in the 2020, we had 150 roads impacted. In 2021, we had 200 roads impacted. We are now looking at close to $1 billion in costs just in the Cariboo Road recovery projects from the impacts of that. Fast forward to what we've seen the last few years, it's something that we are seeing every single year. I'm going to use my blue card, but I'll let him go first and then I'll come back.
Unfortunately, this question has a bit of a sad element to it. Not that floods and droughts are sad. The released carbon that has already happened into the environment will still be there. The problem is going to take a long time. If we stopped clear cutting and we stopped contributing, we're still in deficit for a number of years because there is a catch-up period from the time that you emit carbon to the time that it actually has an effect. And the problem, my primary issue is forestry, because I worked in it and I know a fair amount about it, and my job is to dispel the myth of forestry. We need to end clear cutting. When you clear cut a forest, you kill the thing that holds that soil together. And then when it snows, all that exposed snow melts quickly. And you had mentioned about the landslides. The landslide, you lose the soil, you lose everything, and that destroys the watersheds. We're not going to get away from the conditions that we're in quickly because we already have a deficit of carbon, or too much of it, I should say. What was Herb Hammond? We were here in the Power of Forest presentation on the weekend, and he coined a term that I hadn't heard, which is irretrievable carbon. Because when you cut down a forest, you not only release the carbon that was in that forest, but you also lose the ability of that forest to absorb carbon. So it's like a double whammy. You're releasing a bunch of carbon, and if you turn trees into pellets, you release almost all the carbon or a huge amount of it instantly. So it's kind of sad that we're going to be paying for it for a while.
I do want to talk about opportunities in this one, because I had the ability to sit on the Select Standing Committee of Agriculture for 1.5 years. And it was around carbon sequestration. And I thought, boy, when I first got appointed to this committee, I thought 1.5 years of studying soil. I thought how did I draw that short straw? I'm passionate about agriculture. I think growing agriculture is critically important, especially to our region. What I learned, though, through the presentations through 1.5 years is the work that we can do about improving the soil and the impact that there are tangible things that we can do. We talked about different winter crops. We talked about crop rotation. We talked about different opportunities around the agricultural sector that can really help us manage the changing weather in the region. There are clear recommendations that I think we need to move forward to support that initiative. Years ago, we had extension offices in agriculture. My family were farmers. My dad's here tonight. Don't fall asleep, Dad. Sorry. And one of the things we did is we benefited from the fact that there was extension services where you could go and access different crops, different research crops, what grows for the weather, what responds, how do you do soil testing. All of those services are no longer available readily in the region. And I think if we were to implement that, it would be a strong approach to growing, supporting our agricultural sector, at the same time preparing us as a region to be more prepared for the extreme weather changes that are a result of climate change.
Right. So what time is it? You up for one more question, or we can call it a night? You still
He's
got
got two more cards.
That's all right. I'm going to go one more question. We have a little time here. The so the use of fossil fuels contributes to fine particulates, medium particulates, and all sorts of chemicals into the air we breathe. If elected, what is your take on how reducing this?
I like this question. Again, I had the ability to sit on the airshed management team when I was in local government, where we looked at the PM 2.5, and I think the work that was done at the time was critically important. I think that perhaps some of the funding has been cut back from the airshed management teams. I could be incorrect, but I thought that they were valuable ways of getting data sets that were important on how you can reduce the particulate matters in community. Another piece that we need to talk about in order to look at that is how we review and modernize our firefighting and our response to wildfire, overhauling our forest management and prevention plan to look at our management practices, because forest fires are contributing significantly. We're also going to have to look on PM 2.5 and other particulate matters. What kind of filtration systems can we now be putting in our schools and in our public infrastructure to respond to the health concerns from particulate matters? So those are just a few of the items I was thinking about.
All right. Thank you.
Fine and medium particulates. Actually, I've used this line on my wife before. Hey, baby, you got fine particulates, you know. It's one of those things that's fossil fuel. I mean, it produces things that we don't want around. And that's exactly one of the reasons we want to get rid of it. I mean, you could go as simple as saying, well, put more filters on things, change the regulation, increase penalties for offenders. And it's just part of fossil fuels. And that's what we're trying to get away from. It's one of those things we're dealing with particulates just from wildfires, you know, not exactly just fossil fuel. I mean, when that smoke cloud comes in and it hangs around, we had some pretty rough ones a few years ago. Even if it's just a day, I mean, you feel it. You can just feel it in your throat. You're feeling those from the fossil fuel particulates as well, but it's just not as intense when you're dealing with fire smoke. We shouldn't be breathing any of it, really. If we can the idea is like this is the 2024 Green Party platform, but it's entitled "Powering the Clean Energy Future." Well, the question's about dirty. You know, that's what we're trying to get to, is a clean energy future. Thanks.
All right. I think it's time. We'll just give you an opportunity to have some closing remarks, and open the floor to anything you want to say as a closing remark.
Okay, now that I've gone through all that, I'm Randy Thompson. I have in my little pamphlet here, it's funny the way I started with this thing, with why I'm saying what I'm about to say. was released, or I was declared the candidate for the Green Party, and I post a lot of stuff on Facebook. I've been doing it for years. I write about forestry reform. I've made a lot of enemies and a lot of friends. And 2 days after I was declared the candidate, I posted something called Moving Forward. And somebody from WTF Quesnel contacted me and said, typical politician, no brains, no guts, and no idea. And I thought, 2 days and I'm a typical politician. I'm a fast learner, you know? And I said, I'm not a typical politician. I'm not even a politician. I probably don't come across as a politician. I mean, I'm trying to bring the fact that I'm a guy who's just as fed up with politics as everybody else is. People distrust politics. People distrust politicians. No offense. You're one of the good ones. But it's because it's all kind of double speak, babble, lies. You know, Horgan, elect us and we'll stop Site C. And then, well, now that we've seen the books, I don't know, it's going to cost too much. We've gone too far. So no, we're not going to do that. How do you trust anybody anymore? How do you trust politicians that they're going to actually say what they're going to do? And for me, I could go through a bunch of this stuff, but it's my bio. The truth is extremely important to me. I'll tell you the truth, even if it bites me in the ass. If it's something you disagree with, that's fine. We each have our opinion. But the truth is something factual. The truth is something real that you can prove. Politics and religion are things that you believe. It doesn't mean it's true. You believe them to be true. And if you believe the conservatives are I'm not motioning to you, I'm going to Sheldon on the other side. The conservatives, Doug and I were talking about it. The conservatives haven't had a seat in BC in 50 years. It's because they're still stuck in the 70s. Because it's like when things were good and energy was fine and prosperity everywhere, you know, it's not like that anymore. You know, we have to really look at what we're doing because we're having a huge effect on this planet and our economy and our health and our province. And I've said it before, it's not beautiful BC anymore. It's not supernatural BC anymore. It's a really big tree farm that's lost almost all of its soil. And that's, as a farmer, that's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Coralie Oakes, and I'm asking for your vote on October 19th. And look, it's been an absolute joy having the ability to have these all candidates debates and share ideas with Randy. And I think this is what a campaign should be about. We should be able to come together. We don't have all the answers. We're here to listen. We're here to learn, but we're also here to exchange ideas. The divisive politics, the rhetoric, quite frankly, has gotten to such extremes in British Columbia that it's really pushing people out of politics. And I was quite happy to retire and move on and do some interesting things. And I felt that, quite frankly, at this time, I think we need a centrist voice. I think we need a moderate voice. I think we need a voice that can push back on some of the rhetoric that is happening and to call people to account for things that they say. I don't think I'm the most traditional politician either, Andy. I just have an absolute love for the region. I love where I've come from. I'm proud of where we've come, where we live. And I also said I wanted to run this campaign on another piece that I'm absolutely committed to, and it's post-secondary education. And I started my career at the age of 20 because we didn't have access to post-secondary education in the North, and we'd have to leave. And throughout my time in politics, I've had the privilege of talking to many students, and it's great to see so many students here tonight. Because if you don't have access to local higher education, it can really impact the opportunities of not just your community, but of your life. And I've spent 2 years fighting with the government about the funding formula review. And I've really struggled with the fact that I know that we are at a significantly challenged time. And post-secondary is going to be what helps our communities transition It's going to provide the innovation and the research that we need to make sure that we are able to solve those crises in our community. When I look at healthcare, we need to be training people. When we look at mental health and addictions, we need to be training people. We need to be supporting people. But if we don't have access to that training in our communities, we're going to continue to see the crisis. So I'm going to continue my fight to make sure post-secondary education gets the attention that it needs. I'm critically concerned as well come January, and I've been very clear on this, that the policies that both the federal and the provincial governments have made are going to have significant impact specifically on our smaller campuses. And I'm calling on this government, whoever's the next government, to have a rural adjustment grant for universities and colleges in our smaller communities with lesser, smaller populations. Thanks everyone for this opportunity tonight.
So that ends our forum for this evening. So I'd like to give thanks for the last 3 nights for all the volunteers. There's up on the board there all the people involved in trying to get this organized and make it work, and between the timers and the fact checkers and the greeters, it was and people that spent time generating questions. It is very appreciated. So I also particularly to thank the main organizers for this, which was Doug Beckett and Duong. Very much appreciated for putting this on. I know there's a lot of work between you two to get this going. There's a lot of emails that I was party to. I'd like to thank the audience for coming out. It's always important if the candidates be motivated to come. With 2 of the 4 is that people are here for them here to hear them. That's very important, and that goes with the people who are listening online as well. Very much appreciate your time. And lastly, I'd really like to thank the candidates for coming out and being open and expressing. I know this is not something straightforward for a lot of people. It's a little more involved but you were able to come out and answer the questions and give us an opinion, give you your ideas on what's happening or what you think could be happening. And it's important that we hear about it. And thank you very much for coming out. Very much appreciate you being here. So